So the final count of the number of unread books I have is 53. Not as bad as I thought. Let's just put that on. Lock me up. 53 is not as bad as I thought. Good morning and hello, welcome to this video. I had an idea for a video that I've been thinking about for kind of a long time because over the last few months, especially over the last 2 months since I got my Kindle, I keep thinking to myself, I have way too many unread books on my bookshelves. I decided to start a series where I will read 1 to 2 books off my physical TBR every month and make a reading vlog for those books. I don't know how this is gonna go because some months I get so many holds in from the library that I have a lot of not physical books to read. I also have some times where, well, because I'm a mood reader, I feel bored reading certain books because I'm just like, this is not what I want right now. We'll see what happens. I'm actually planning, so I'll show you. I'm going to move all of my physical unread books into my living room because I've been seeing people like stack their books on like against a wall. I recently like moved around my living room a little bit. I'm gonna move my books to under the window, and then every month, beginning of the month, which we're walking into November, I want to be able to see them more clearly because like, look, I'll show you. Okay, so this shelf is like a lot of things that I've already read, but these are all like books that I haven't read yet, or I've read a few pages and then I put it down. I did read this one though. And then down there as well, want to start like removing them from the shelf, and then I don't know where I'm gonna put the shelf yet, but removing them from the shelf, stacking them in my living room, and then seeing which ones I want to read. But like, I read this, I read this, I read this, I read this, I read this. I think all of these, no, from here to here, I've already read these ones. I've also read these two. I haven't, I mean, guys, I know this is a small book. I don't know why I haven't finished reading it yet. Like, this is honestly going to be the first one I pick because it's literally such an easy read. But yeah, I also read these. Anyways, I don't know if that makes sense. But let's move them. It's early in the morning. I have thesis stuff to do. But before I do that, I want to do this. So I've been listening to Halsey's album. It just came out like 2 days ago, but I was waiting to listen to it until I was in my car driving to school because I knew I'd be able to listen to all of the songs. This album just keeps making me cry. It's so beautiful, first of all. There are songs on it that like, they're not necessarily my style, and every single album that she's ever put out, there have been songs where I'm like, I love less. The thing is, over time, when I return to those albums, songs that I didn't love at that time, I love. Like, I listen to them again and I'm like, wow, this is actually so good. I think it really just, her music is so, she has such a like diverse discography and like so many genres, and so like she's so talented. I think like just it's just that there's something that's applicable no matter what stage in life that I've been in. I've been listening to her music for 10 years now. I think she's the longest artist that I've ever listened to consistently, because I didn't listen to music very much growing up, and then once I did, she was like one of the first artists that was on my radar that I just fell in love with. They really are like my, like, just, I don't know. they got me through some hard times. Let's just put it that way. I know that this is like a different video altogether, but I'm gonna tell you about this. Listen to the album if you haven't. Okay, so I've finally set up my books. It's not as many as I worried it would be, which I'm really happy about, because that just means that I'm not altogether the worst book buyer, because I always get worried that like, oh, I buy too many books and then don't read any of them. But I think historically, most books that I buy them because they're super interesting to me, so I end up reading them pretty quickly. Like one of the books that I bought before knowing anything about it, before reading it, was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. That is one of my all-time favorite books. Like that's one of the books that made me. I think the problem is more so that I start books and they lose my attention, or I get busy and I don't finish them. This is like the stack of books that I've read like a good chunk of them and then I just dropped it. Do remember, let me give you my excuses. This is a video series about not finishing physical books and not reading my physical books. So let me give you the rundown. This book I started reading before summer. Ooh, that hurt. I started reading this before the summer, and then when the semester ended and I was packing to go on my trips, I left her behind because I was like, first of all, it's not that interesting to me so far, and second of all, I don't want to carry a book with me. I remember what happened, and I remember it being very slow, but I don't know if it was slow because the pacing was slow or if it was slow because I was reading slowly. So that's her. This one I started reading before my trips in the summer. The other thing too, though, was that I was going very slowly, and I think I just wasn't in the mindset to read it, and I ended up pausing it after a while. I didn't buy this book for myself though. My uncle bought this for me. I will say, I think I was being a harsh critic earlier this year, because now thinking back on it, the distance that I've felt since reading this part, there are aspects of this book that I found really interesting, which was why I didn't like absolutely altogether DNF it, and I just put aside with my bookmark in it. You can tell if I've DNF'd a book based on whether I put a bookmark in it or not, because there are a couple books on here that I've started and then I just took my bookmark out and I was like, I can't do this right now. But yeah, I still want to read her. Here's the thing. I thought I was bored with the book, but in the months since I stopped reading it, I keep wondering to myself, like, I wonder what happens in that book. So I think I'm going to return to this too. This one I'm really ashamed about because I needed to read it for school and I skimmed through it. Let's just say that. My uncle Napoleon. Started reading her. I love this book. I thought it was really interesting. I just didn't have time. I got so busy. I think I was reading this when I was first teaching and I was first trying to like, you know, figure out the ropes, and I just ended up not finishing it. I got through the class because I ended up reading a different book all like fully, and I also like did research on this and I wrote a lot, so I really want to read this too. Like, don't get me wrong, I want to read this. The final culprit is A Little Life. So I found out about Little Life when I first joined like watching BookTube and joined Bookstagram and stuff, and people were posting about it a lot. I saw that one of my favorite YouTubers hates this book. I started reading this and then I got to a part that was like really intense. And at that point in my life, literally like 2-3 years ago, I just was not in the mind and the headspace to read this. But I've always wanted to go back to it because I think I want to be able to decide for myself what I think about it, because there are a lot of like polarizing opinions about this book. And I'm really curious to see what I'll think about it, because the thing about the reader I am is that I will read books with like terrible things and absolutely love them and eat them up. My philosophy is that life has terrible things. It's good to represent that in books. The thing that I do hate though is when you can tell that an author is just trauma dumping on a character and not really paying attention to the story, or like giving a character a backstory so that you'll have a reason to like them. Because I don't think that a character's tragic backstory should be the only reason you like them. I don't think that that should be the case. So we'll see. So those are the 4 books that are like immediately on my radar, but as you can see, they're all pretty chunky books. And for November, because it's the month that I'm going to be defending my thesis, I don't think I'm going to have that much time. And if I do, I want to spend it on books that like are easier to read, or like books that are more interesting to me immediately. Queen of Nothing. I don't know if you heard that. I have 2 picks. One of them I actually recently got on my Kindle. So I got Phantom of the Opera, which it's not even in this stack. I have the physical book in my room, and that's because I told myself I'm already reading it on the Kindle, so I don't have to worry about putting it in the stack. This is the stack of books that are glaring at me and telling me you need to read us. I'm actually gonna pick 3, and the reason for that is because I'm picking 2 really small books and then like a normal size book. Phantom of the Opera, which is over there. I should have brought it for the purposes of the video. I want to read, finally, Letters to the Young Poet, because I started reading it. This is another book that I started reading. I took the bookmark out of this because I was like, this is such a tiny book. You should be ashamed of yourself. Just sit down and read it in one go. And I never have. Yeah. Letters to a Young Poet, which I've read some of, but I'm just gonna read it from start and like kind of consume it all together. Then White Nights by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. I love Dostoyevsky. I read The Brothers Karamazov for a class, like an independent studies class that I took in college 4 years ago in 2020. I loved that book. That book like split something in my soul and then repatched it so that my frame of mind just changed. I've always wanted to go back to reading that book again, but I'm gonna kind of avoid rereads for a little while. She says as she's in the middle of rereading Queen of Nothing. Anyway, I don't know too much about this book, so these are my 3 picks. This is what we're doing. Phantom of the Opera, White Nights, Letters to a Young Poet. Not very similar genres, but that's not the point here. I just want to read the books that are kind of calling to me. I counted my books a few weeks ago. I had 229 physical books. At this point in time, I'm pretty sure I have closer to like 234, 35 because I bought Wicked King, Queen of Nothing, and then Woman Eating. But 53 unread books is a good amount because I have 235 total. I'm excited to mark these read. Oh, is this a vlog update or is this I don't know what this is for. Actually, this is for my reading, for my November mark to read episode 1. First of all, let's just appreciate the scarf. Second of all, I thought you guys were lying to me about this being good. I thought everyone was lying about liking this, but this is actually so good. I think about halfway through. I've been switching between reading on my Kindle and then I pulled up the little paperback. I love a cracked spine. Oh my god, wait. Yes, I've been switching between reading on my Kindle and reading the paperback. 50-ish% through, like 49, 50. It's actually so good. I'm not having reactions with any of the books so far because I finished Letters to a Young Poet like a couple days ago and I'm halfway through this one. And then I'll get to White Nights, but none of these books are like books that I'm having like reactions to the way that I was reacting to the Queen of Nothing. So I'm kind of like, we're getting through this. I don't want to get rid of the paperback copy. Like, I've decided she's staying unless it gets really bad within the next half, but people are pretty ride or die for this book, so I can't imagine it's gonna get worse. I'm having a good time. said before, there's nothing really to like react to, but this is so funny. You've been there for 24 hours, he said, and you're annoying me. I tell you, all this will end very badly, and you'll have brought it upon yourself, for I have been extraordinarily patient with you. You think you are following me, you great booby, whereas it is I who am following you, and I know all that you know about me here. I spared you yesterday in my communist road, but I warn you, seriously, don't let me catch you there again. Upon my word, you don't seem able to take a hint. Me when men are annoying. I'm better than no child because every time the opera ghost, the Phantom of the Opera Lola, calls the Persian a booby, it just makes me giggle. Why is that so funny, actually? Like, I know he's being so freaking for real. Finish this. I'll talk about it more, like, when I sit down to talk about all 3 of the books. But I will say I had a really good time with this. Being nosy about my neighbors. I had a really good time with this. This was so fun to read. There was 10 pages towards the middle to end that I was getting tired of reading. When they're in the torture chamber, which I don't think this is particularly spoilers, but I won't go into it too much until later on when I can do like a proper warning. But it was just so long for no reason, and I was like, is this the part where I start to resent this book? But no, we got through, and I really liked the ending. I enjoyed the writing style. I really enjoyed the descriptions of the place. Like, so it's all set in the opera house, right? And there's like a lot of mechanics and like architecture talk in this, where like they talk about like the mechanisms and how it works, and like these secret trap doors, and like there's honestly entire world underneath the opera house. And I thought that it was super vivid and super like just very engaging. And then I think like out of all the characters, I don't know, this is probably the common sentiment, but out of all the characters, I for sure loved the Phantom Ghost the most. He was so crazy, but like he ate me up. Like, I think he's similar to Lestat in that way, just very crazy. But I get it. Just wanted to be loved. I mean, sorry, he locked her up, but he just wanted to be loved. These are half-baked thoughts, but I think he was the most complex character out of all of them, which is also why I liked him the most. Initial thoughts, really enjoyed this. Much more than I expected to, because I thought it was just gonna be like a boring classic, which, like, don't get me wrong, I love classics. I have read many classics in my time, and I still do. I feel like I have a specific taste, but maybe not. Just wanted to report that I have finished reading this. So I only have White Nights left, and I'm gonna try to see if I can find like a Kindle version or PDF, because I don't want to bend that book. You can tell on this book at what point I started reading the physical copy. Basically, I lost access to my Kindle version, and the like Libby book ebook that I'd borrowed, and it was like 8 weeks to wait for the next one. I was like, I'm not gonna be able to finish this by the end of November if I wait 8 weeks. I don't know if I explained it very well at the beginning of the like vlog, but essentially what's gonna happen is if I cannot read the books that I have chosen within the time frame that I've chosen, which is like about a month, then I will get rid of them. Anyways, that's that for now. On to White Nights. Reading White Nights right now. My chair is swinging back. This is so funny. Okay, so I myself didn't know the summary for this book. I just picked it up because it was Dostoyevsky. The back says, two devastating Russian stories of solitude, unrequited love, and depravity from beyond the grave. So I was like, damn, that's crazy. But this part is so funny. Stenka is telling her like life story to the narrator. She's talking about like her grandmother pinning her to her dress. Let me just read it to you. Here Nastenka paused and laughed. I started to laugh with her. She stopped at once. Now listen, don't you laugh at my grandmother. I'm laughing because it's funny. Now her being like, I can laugh at this, but you can't. I mean, go off, girl. I have to go to school soon, but I'm still reading. Nastenka is so freaking funny. She's so like sassy. So basically she tells him, stop, don't interrupt my story, because if you interrupt my story, I'm gonna forget what I'm trying to say. She's talking about how her grandmother has like a tenant, and then the guy interrupts her, the narrator. Oh my god, that's so shiny. But the narrator interrupts her. Consequently, there must have been an old lodger, I noted in passing. Well, of course there was, Nastenka replied, and one who knew how to keep quiet better than you do. I kind of love her. That's so funny. All three of the books that I chose for this video. I finished White Nights, which was the last one, a couple days ago, and I just waited so that my brain could kind of like process what I read for all three of them before I sat down and told you about them. So the final verdict is I am keeping all of these. As you probably guessed, if I had to rate them, which this would not be a fair rating because they're just not the same, I would say that out of the three, Phantom of the Opera was probably my favorite. I did love Letters to a Young Poet as well, but in terms of like story and stuff, in terms of like how entertaining it was, in terms of how interesting it was, Phantom of the Opera definitely wins in that in that sense. So I'll kind of just talk to you about them in the order that I read them. So the first one that I read obviously was Letters to a Young Poet. I started it from the beginning because I wanted to, you know, consume it all together. Like I said, kind of read it all together. I was highlighting a few things. I underlined a few things. I don't know what copy this is. I actually did not buy this either. I don't know if it's helpful to point out like how I bought these books or like where I got them, but this one I picked up on one of those tables at my university. So a lot of universities have this. My college had it, and my current university has it. My undergrad, I don't know if it had it because I never went in person. Long story, but that was during COVID. So anyway, I actually didn't pay for this. I picked it up because one of the professors, someone just left it on the table, where a lot of professors will like leave books that they don't want anymore, or books that maybe they got like newer copies for. So that's where I got this from. Obviously, like if you've heard about this book, you probably know that it's just like very inspiring. It's inspiring for people who are creatives, and it's also inspiring for people who aren't. It's really just about, you know, looking at life in a certain lens. Instead of looking at it from like a negative perspective, instead of feeling like, oh, everything is lost, everything is pointless, kind of trusting the world. We have no reason to mistrust our world, for it is not against us. Has it terrors? They are our terrors. Has it abysses? Those abysses belong to us. Our dangers at hand, we must try to love them. Perhaps everything terrible is in its deepest being something helpless that wants help from us. Nobody can counsel and help you. Nobody. Go into yourself. Search for the reason that bids you write. Find out whether it is spreading out its roots in the deepest places of your heart. Acknowledge to yourself whether you would have to die if it were denied you to write. And that's like specifically about writing, which I really liked because I think it's something interesting to consider with every like any passion that you have, is like, how desperate are you to continue this passion? Like, are you just doing it for like, you know, financial reasons? Are you doing it because you really like care about it? And I think that's important. I don't usually fold my books, but I did for this one because it's an old copy and I was like, you know what? The other thing that he points out is like not to read criticism and just let art like speak to you. And if you have like a reaction to it, you don't need to like put a judgment on it, which I really liked. And I think it's one of the thoughts that I've had in my brain, which is why I try to avoid in my videos about books mentioning ratings, because I don't want to do that. You know, I rate them on Goodreads and Fable because it's like just a visceral reaction in that moment. I'll put it just to kind of know where it lands in terms of like on my own personal scale, but I wouldn't want to like, as of right now, that could change, but as of right now, I wouldn't want to put any sort of like rating on here of like, oh, this is a 5-star book, because a 5-star book to me is going to be very different from a 5-star book to someone else. I don't know. I think it was like a really inspirational. It was nice to read. Like, I'm sure this is something that over the years I would return to just because he makes a lot of good points. And even if I didn't return to like read the whole thing, I would definitely like pick up on the highlights and stuff and just be like, That was Letters to a Young Poet. Really enjoyed this. It's such a short book too. I think it's definitely worth picking up and reading. The next book that I read was Phantom of the Opera, which I had such a good time with. Like, I know a lot of people like this book and I really enjoyed it. I think I actually was so surprised to have enjoyed it as much as I did. I know I talked about it a bit before in the same video, but I want to kind of get into it a little bit. So there might be spoilery stuff. I'm going to talk about it kind of as normal because I don't think there is much that's like spoilery in this type of book. But if you want to read it on your own and you want to like get a picture of everything that happens, then you can skip ahead. Okay. Because I'm gonna like talk about whatever I want to talk about. So I'm waiting for you to leave if you want to. Okay, so getting into this book. This book starts out with these two new managers buying the opera house from the old managers. They are told about the opera ghost and how they have to give him a certain amount of money every month and how they have to reserve box number 5 for him and just obey him so that he won't ruin things for the opera. That's kind of like the setup. Have like your key players, which is Raoul, who's like a viscount. There's Christine, which is like the main female love interest girl. And then obviously the Phantom Ghost. There's also the Persian, which I was like, justice for the Phantom Ghost. Kind of like carrying on with Christine. And towards the beginning of the book, I wasn't really sure how she felt about him. I think for most of the book, you don't really know how she feels about him. And you get like clarity later on, but I'm not going to kind of put that there. That's something you can read for yourself. I'm not going to tell you that. Raoul, the Viscount, is also like enamored with Christine, in love with her. They've been childhood friends for a really long time. And again, you don't know necessarily for a huge portion of the book how she feels about him. At one point, I mentioned this earlier, and I know this might be spoilery, but I didn't like say who, but he like the Phantom Ghost, I'm literally obsessed with him because like why is he kind of like, I feel bad for him because he just wants to be loved. Like I said earlier, like he locks Christine up but I didn't even like, I could pretend I didn't see that. The ending, I won't tell you what happens in the ending, don't want to spoil it to that extent, but the ending was really satisfying to me. I kind of wanted it to go a different way, but I loved the way the ending wrapped up. So that was Phantom of the Opera, which I really liked. So if you have this book on your shelf, highly recommend you read it. And if you've already read it, I really want to know what you thought about it because I do know that there are like differing opinions like with everything. The final book that is selected for this video is White Nights by Dostoyevsky. So this book actually has 2 stories, and surprisingly I liked the second one, which isn't the title story, more than I liked White Nights. White Nights was so fun. Like it was so funny. First of all, I loved the female main character, Nastenka. I can't pronounce her name. This is so hard. I don't want to say anything because it's such a short book. I don't want to like spoil any part of it, but it's just a love story that ends in a way that I honestly didn't entirely expect, but like you could see it coming. Like you knew that was a very real possibility. I just was hoping it wouldn't happen that way just because I was like, I feel bad for the narrator. But also, Nastenka, she ate it up. Especially, she's so funny. Like the quotes that I read for you earlier, she's so sassy. And then the second one is Babuk. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. That was like much shorter than White Nights. I really like this one. The narrator sits at a graveyard because like he's invited to like a funeral procession or something like that. And he's just sitting there and he just hears a bunch of like people talking from beyond the grave, which I was like, wow, that is so cool actually. Like I love things like that. And they're having like whole conversations and he's just sitting there and listening. So I really enjoyed that. I feel like for a short story, nothing really happens, which I guess is fine. There was nothing like drawing me to continue reading beyond the fact that I found it fascinating that the dead were speaking. There wasn't really like a driving force for the narrative in this one, but White Nights definitely had more of a driving force because like in White Nights you want to know what happens between the narrator and the girl and blah blah blah. I would recommend picking this up. It is interesting and it's not that long. I just was like not as engaged with this as I was with like Phantom of the Opera, which makes the most sense because like out of these three, it's like this is the novel, you know, and I don't read as many short stories as I do novels. I also don't read that much poetry and I don't read like that many essays. So obviously out of these three, it makes sense that Phantom was my favorite, but I did love the other ones too. That's my little situation for that. Now I'm going to go bring a couple of the options that I have for December and we're going to pick together what I'm going to read next. So actually what I'm going to probably do is pick like 4 to 5 that I'm looking at, and then I'm gonna just ask you guys to pick which ones I should read. What I'll probably do is post like a poll on my Instagram just to see like what people think I should read next. I have a few that I want to pick up and I have more time. I'm foreseeing that I'm gonna have more time in December because the semester ends pretty early on in December and then I'm also going on a trip. So I'll have like flight time and stuff to read. Let's pick the books that I'm gonna read next. Okay. I'll just like describe very briefly what I know of the book. First one, Kafka on the Shore by Murakami. I know nothing about this book, so I will tell you nothing about this book, but I did read After Dark and I really enjoyed that one. I know he's kind of a controversial author, but he is also very like well loved, so I want to read more from him. So there's that. The next one is Raven Boys. I just know that this is like a YA fantasy. I've been wanting to read it for a while. I almost unhauled this like a few months ago. 2 YouTubers that I follow said that they really like the Raven Boys, so I was like, maybe I shouldn't unhaul this and I should read this. So that's the next one. Then we have 2 smaller books, Wide Sargasso Sea. This actually first came on my radar because I took a post-colonial literature class in my first year at my school. And this was one of the books that we didn't read it in that class, but we kind of discussed it. And it's essentially like the other side of Jane Eyre. I read Jane Eyre a long time ago, but the wife in the basement situation, this is from her perspective, which sounded really interesting to me. And it's literally less than 200 pages. Like I could read this in one sitting if I sat down and read. So this is the next option. We have Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, which is an essay. It's a feminist essay, and I've been wanting to read this for a while. Again, not really very long. This is definitely something I could finish in one sitting, and it's less than 150 pages. It's like 25 cents. LOL. At one point. I'm gonna be so for real. I'm already looking at these 2 because they're so small. But the other thing is I don't want to pick too many small ones because then I'll knock all my small ones and then I won't have any small ones to like pair with bigger books. Okay, let's do this. If I pick one of the small ones, I can still pick 2 big ones. If I pick up both small ones, I'll pick up one more big one. Okay, the next one is one I talked about earlier in this vlog, Fish Have No Feet. I want to finish this really bad, especially because this was a Christmas gift and I want to kind of finish it before Christmas if I can. So this is like top of my list of preferences. So we'll see. A Little Life, which I also talked about earlier in this vlog. I have mixed feelings about this. I picked it up because I was like, I kind of want to like read this and just kind of like figure out how I feel about it. But it's also really big. So I think if I pick this one, I would want to pick the 2 small ones. See what my friends on Instagram will decide for me. Finally, The Familiar, which I wanted to buddy read with one of my friends, but she was taking like she's one of my friends from the program. She was taking a really intense workshop, which I took like 2 years ago or something. We like paused that, and I paused it too because I wanted to read it with her. I've been thinking of finishing it. Honestly, this kind of is in a category of its own because I want to read this so bad. So yeah, those are the 7 books that I physically own that I want to read in December. The way that I'm like trying to do it is that I pick my books before the month starts, so I kind of get like a little bit of a head start so that before I pick for the next month, like you guys can help me. Yeah, these are cute. Ugh, I love books. Help me decide. Let me know in the comments which one you think I should pick up. Also put a poll on my Instagram and see what people think I should pick up. I have like a kind of a guess of which ones will get more votes on the poll. So I think what I'm gonna do is do 2 different polls and then see like the ones that get the most among those 2. Whatever. I'm gonna kind of divide them into ones that I want to read and ones that I don't. Maybe I'll add an 8th book. Should I add an 8th book just so I have 2 polls of 4? Because all my rage is kind of looking at me. I kind of want to read All My Rage before I read Air, even though they have nothing to do with each other. Okay, I'm gonna add All My Rage. I genuinely didn't think I'd have that many reactions to like these, but I ended up really liking them / having reactions to them. So yeah, anyways, reading vlogs are like my favorite. Thank you for watching. This was so fun. Thank you for being here, and I hope to catch you in another video very soon. Bye for now.